for now. There we go. All right. We will wait for people to start showing up, and then we'll get started. Just another minute or two. Have you been playing any video games lately, there, Chris?
I just started. What is that? The one from. 1 second. I will walk over and I will know the answer.
Is it a new one? Is it a?
It's Infamous Second Son. I just picked that up for cheap. I wasn't the Bloodborne game, but I don't know. Like, I really like the Dark Souls game, but then every game that comes out, they're just hyping how horribly difficult it is. And it's like, I liked it because it was balanced and well done, like not because it was difficult.
Right.
So, I
just played Second Son like a week ago. Realized that I had it, yeah, and I was looking for a game to play. I had a lot of fun running around fake Seattle. It was kind of neat.
That's I would say I figured that would be your background.
Just kind of, it's not Seattle, but hey, there's it's the Pioneer Square area kind of, and here's the fish market kind of. It was cool. And the Space Needle, you get to climb up the Space Needle, so I'm all about that.
It's that part where you climb up the Space Needle.
Of course, you can't put a game in fake Seattle and then not climb up the Space Needle. It's like our thing.
I'll say it's New York without the Empire State Building or something.
Right. All right, looks like people are starting to roll in here, so we're gonna get started. Hey everybody, welcome to Prop Live. This is the show we do every week where we take your prop and costume making questions. I'm Bill Doran from Punish Props, the guy that runs this show. And this week, we've got a guest on, like we usually do. This is my pal Chris from Ammnra Creations. Hey Chris, how's it going?
Hey everybody.
How are things looking weather-wise down in the Bay Area? I will be there this weekend.
It is a chilly 83 degrees currently.
Oh, not bad.
Yeah, so great costume weather, especially foam-based costumes, but we survive.
Wonderful. How you been, man? What are you working on? You got anything super neat?
I have some under-the-radar Dragon Age stuff I've been working on. If it works out, it'll be awesome. If not, no one will ever hear about it. But yeah, I've been messing around with a lot of Dragon Age stuff recently because just finished that game up.
You were where you had your Garrus costume on?
I momentarily unretired my Garrus costume for WonderCon, which was down in Anaheim. So I drove down there and cracked that sucker out of its bucket and survived that one.
Cool. You also recently did, and by the way, folks watching, head over to Facebook and look up Ammnra Creations. You did this engram from Destiny, and I think that's just the neatest thing ever. How'd you put that guy together?
Well, the central core, kind of the frame, you can see it's 3D printed in a translucent white plastic, and then inserted into that there are 12 5-sided sides, which are laser cut out of edge glow acrylic. And then in the central hub is actually hollow. You block it off with a little bit of foil tape, and then you just jam a couple LEDs up in there and turn it on. And so it works really well light-wise because the internal frame works as kind of a light pipe and bounces the light around internally. But then the edge glow acrylic works really great at capturing any light that comes out, from the center and then shooting it back into the actual frame. So it really glows quite nicely.
It's pretty cool. I see you got some of the acrylic there. Very nice.
Yeah. So half of the problem was finding the right color because that Ingram is the weird orangish yellowish color.
Mm-hmm.
And stumbled on someone that had yellow edge glow acrylic, and I was like, and this is going to be an Ingram now.
Cool. And when you say the edge glow stuff, do you mean like the stuff that kind of day glows a bit?
Yeah, so the way it works is that any light that hits large flat surfaces tends to want to get trapped internally until it hits the surface at kind of a wide enough angle. And so it tends to pipe the lights out the edges, but when you engrave it, it also pipes the light out of all the engraving.
Yeah.
So it's great for visors and things that you really want to kind of have the lines pop on.
I gotcha. So like this stuff here, I guess I don't know how good this is like a green.
Green stuff. So here I have a couple samples of green, and I think some of the orangey ones. So this is the Edge Glow orange, Edge Glow green, and then you get the Edge Glow yellow. And so you can kind of see that it tends to want to grab the light and shoot it out the side, and any engraving you have.
That's cool. So, yeah, some of that stuff, it's really neat. Like I found a lot of times, you're like, oh, I'll jam lights in it. But some of the times, we even without light like LEDs in it, it still catches enough sunlight to where it looks really bright.
When I started using it, I was making visors for my Scariest mask out of just normal acrylic. And in a darkened room with lights, you're like, oh, it looks perfect, it's great. But then you go outside and take a photo, and the sunlight blows out your LEDs. Using that Edge Glow stuff, you put LEDs in it, it looks fantastic. But then when you're outside, it still looks great because it's doing all refraction. So I love that stuff.
Another thing you did recently ties in with something I did recently. You made a Destiny Hunter knife. Here, I got a picture right there. Boop, look at that. Some shiny looking knives right there.
There's this bad boy right there.
Oh,
so I two of these guys out at work in a bit of a short period. So I just grabbed your template. I traced it over in my program of choice, SolidWorks, and then I just laser engraved and cut everything out of Masonite, that weird particle board, and then use my favorite friend, foil tape.
Yeah. So did you cut both sides and then glue it together?
No. So the reason I ended up with two wasn't because I wanted to go blade dancing. It was because on the laser bed, I made a file that looked like this, and then I laser cut them. And then I popped them out of their frame and stuck them back in the frame, and then ran the program again, so it perfectly lined up the two sides. So it was literally easier to make two than it was, because otherwise you'd have to cut them, and you could do cut and then glue together.
Yeah,
but I just made two.
Keep that in mind. I've had some projects, like for example. So, by the way, folks, I'll be at Big Wow this weekend in California, and I'm going to have some of these cool little keychains I'll be selling. So for like these guns here, I was thinking about doing engraving on them, but it would only be on one side because you can't line it up to do the other side. But what you're saying is if I cut out like a bunch of them and half of them are mirrored.
Yeah, put a whole sheet on there, tape the sheet down on the edges so it won't move, and then do 50% one way and flip 50% the other. Then when you're done, just pop them out, rotate, and run it again.
Street over, everyone. I'm gonna go do that right now. That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is super clever. Anyway, the everyone watching, if you haven't gone to my YouTube channel, check out the Destiny Hunter knife tutorial I put together. It's worth watching, I think. It's got a free template file, so you can go make yours out of foam or apparently Masonite. You have a laser cutter. So folks ought to go check that out. Let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, another quick housekeeping thing, everybody. The pre-orders for the Foamsmith book have all been mailed out. So if you're watching and you ordered one, it's on its way to your house right now. And then we will start normal orders next week. So we'll just sell them like normal from our store next week. So that's what's going on. Yeah. Anything else before we start taking some questions here, Chris? Are you good to go?
I'm prepared for question time.
Wonderful. Folks who are watching, if you are on the event page, there's the Q&A app there. You can send in questions right there. They'll show up on my screen here. We'll answer them. And I also have a bunch of questions that people left on Facebook from earlier today. So I'll grab one of those and get started. Let's see. This first one is from Fearless Facade. He says, or she says, I typically use multiple layers of PVA to seal my foam projects. In the interest of saving time and money, do you think a spray adhesive would have the same effect? Chris, have you done much foam armor stuff?
I've done a little bit on my Talus costume, but not nearly as much as you or Will has.
Right. Did you seal that at all with anything?
So I actually used what I call like flex glue or fabric glue. It's basically just a giant jug of white glue, and you just do a bunch of layers of that and then wet sand between it. That's what I used.
Yep. So that's a PVA glue, like wood glue or Elmer's or Mod Podge, any of that sort of stuff. A spray adhesive, I'm not sure would be the best choice. When I hear spray adhesive, I think like Super 77. But I've been really liking Plasti Dip lately, just because it comes in a rattle can. It's really easy to apply. So I've been going with Plasti Dip lately, and I recommend folks, if you can get your hands on it, give it a try. Here we go. Here's another one, another foam question. I'll knock it out real quick. Brad wants to know, he's constantly having an issue using Quick Seal to fix small holes in the foam and to fill in the seams. But after the first coat, it's sunken in a lot and I have to constantly apply more layers. I will say that my buddy Ted Smith has recommended trying Quick Seal. I haven't tried it yet. I always say if you can get your seams really, really smooth and sealed together in the first place, then you're going to be way better off. And that's why I love Barge or any contact cement, because then if you get it applied right to the edge of the pieces you want to glue together, when you push them together, your seam will be nearly flawless. It'll be really, really good. Just take your time putting it together, make sure everything lines up. That is my sealing foam and fixing gaps in foam advice always. All right. Ooh, this is one that I'm sure Chris can appreciate. This is from someone who calls himself "Don't try this at home," although I doubt it's Adam Savage. As an internet business, how do you handle shipping, i.e., a package by package basis, or do you have a flat rate service for the lower 48? What makes a good shipping service? So, Chris, you've shipped out a couple things, haven't you?
Yeah, one or two through Etsy. I use USPS. I used to use FedEx and UPS. I ultimately found that, especially if you ship internationally, doing everything at USPS will save you some time. I mean, my best advice is you kind of have to ballpark how large and how heavy the kind of stuff you sell is. And then as you start selling, you will realize quickly if you are over or under, and then you just have to adjust it. I don't recommend, like, some people go crazy and they have a separate price for if you live in Florida and if you live in Colorado or if you live, in California. Like a flat rate for the 48 is pretty good. Flat rate boxes are really easy to calculate. You're looking at like $6.50 for the smallest box. You're looking at like $40 for the smallest international box. And then the other thing not to forget when you're charging for shipping is that boxes and tape and labels and the time you spend hating your time inside of the post office, those are all things you have to not forget. Because when I first started selling, I charged them for the shipping and then realized, I'm losing money on all the tape and the boxes and the packing material that I was buying. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yep, definitely keep it all in mind. As someone who just mailed out a whole crap ton of books, if you have a lot of the same thing, then definitely look to see what the best option is. For the books, it turned out that the flat rate envelopes were the best for domestic. That ended up being something like $6 per book, which was pretty good. And it was easy because I can go to the post office website and order those envelopes for free. Like, it didn't even cost anything to ship it. Just like a couple hundred of those envelopes showed up for free because you use the flat rate service. You pay for priority shipping on it. But it was easy. I just unstick the tape, jam a book into it, zip it up, do the postage, and send it out. For international, though, those same flat rate things would be way too expensive. So I went to Uline. I ordered a bunch of book mailers. Those were like 65 cents each. And I did the shipping, just normal international shipping on those. So it depends on, especially if you're shipping a lot of things. It may be easier to do the flat rate thing or maybe easier to do or cheaper to do it a different way.
Yeah, one of the good cutoff points I found is right around 1 pound to 2 pounds. It's the transition in which the flat rate boxes will actually save you money. Like, I ship a lot of hats, and I buy boxes and box up the hats because they're still cheaper because they weigh exactly 8 ounces.
The flat rate boxes are great if you have like a bunch of bricks because it doesn't matter how much it weighs when you send it out.
Yeah.
Thank you. Don't try this at home. I feel like we could probably talk about shipping stuff for like the next 45 minutes.
Shipping frustrations and strategies.
There's a lot that goes on. Did you see, speaking of, did you see that Harrison over at Volpin Props just posted the box for his giant bow?
Yeah, I can't imagine how much that cost to ship.
I don't even want to know. But I occasionally, when I build like a really nice big one-off piece of something, I end up building a box specifically for it. And this is Harrison's latest creation, a box so big that he can stand in it and not touch the top.
Nice.
So yeah, shipping props is a whole world unto itself. All right, let's grab another question. This one is from James. Says, for an up-and-coming prop maker, what should the basic newbie get for tools and materials? Chris, do you have a handful of basic tools that you say everyone should probably get?
Yeah, the Dremel, so important it's its own verb. For me, I would say a really good soldering iron, and by really good, I mean one that senses its own temperature, so it heats up quickly and stays hot. Like hot glue gun, like a basic sewing machine is really good. And then the other thing you can't go wrong with is a buttload of like finishing stuff. So brushes and glues and all of that kind of stuff. Those are kind of a good and relatively inexpensive set of tools that you can pick up.
Yeah, there's a lot of the tools I have, the big guys here. The Dremel will do all of those things. It just doesn't do it as quickly or as accurately. But you, especially for people who live in an apartment, just get a Dremel, get all the bits. I have so many. Like look at this thing. Like it's got a sanding. It's a flappy sanding bit, I believe is what that's called. Or I just got this. It's a tungsten carbide bit for grinding stuff. It's for doing like concrete and stuff. But it will. If it'll do concrete, guess what else it'll do? Just about anything else. So go get all the bits. That's what I say. That was a good list. Go get all of those, James. You'll be fine. All right, here we go. Another one. This one's from Sam. He wants to know, what's your advice for making hand armor? This is a good one for Chris, actually. He says he usually just uses tactical-looking gloves for most of his costumes. He also wants to know if I'll be at C2E2. I don't know. I might, but I haven't heard a word on it, so I might not. Anyway, gloves, Chris, go!
I've done a couple set of gloves. The first ones I did were some Daft Punk gloves, and what I did is I built my own vacuum former, which is ridiculously easy. I recommend people try that. What I did is I just took like a surgical glove and poured a bunch of plaster into it, let it dry hanging up, ripped it off, and then vacuum formed that, and then cut out chunks. So that'll give you hand armor. I've also done a lot of work with PET G. It's the same stuff they make soda bottles out of. You can cut stuff out of that. You can buy thicker stuff from McMaster Carr. It's kind of like Worbla, only it needs to get really hot, and it's slightly harder to work with. And then recently I made a robot hand, and I did the whole thing with 3D printed SLS nylon. That's another way to do it. Slightly more expensive. But those are the ways I've tackled hand armor.
Yeah, I'm trying to find that robot glove, a picture of it on your...
It's hidden. If you look closely, my Ingram photo has that one in there.
Oh, yeah? That's pretty good. I do like your idea to fill a glove with plaster to make a cheap hand form. If folks want to do something similar to that, get some dental alginate, go to Smooth On, just look up alginate. It's actually fairly cheap. And to make a one-use mold, if you want to make a copy of your hand, just get that and some hydrocal, put the alginate in a bucket, and just hold your hand in there for 5 minutes, and then pull it out, and you have a copy, and then you have a mold of your hand, and then you pour in some hydrocal or some plaster, and you'll have a copy of your hand. And then if you want to do some complicated hand armor type things, you can sculpt it on there. You could form stuff over it, like heat form things over it. You can do lots of other things with a copy of your hand.
Yeah, I did that as a process and made this. This is where I started to get all the measurements for my 3D printed parts. But same thing, alginate in a bucket. I now have an extra hand.
There you go. It's always useful to have an extra hand around. All right, Sam, I'm no word if I'll be at C2E2, but if you're going to be there, then you have a good time. All right. Grab another one. This one is from the Cat. Cat likes the Destiny and Dragon Age Inquisition stuff. Wondering how to start using fluorescent plexiglass and the tools that are important to have for that. It's all you, Chris.
A laser cutter is but if you go to Ponoko.com, it's actually where all of my Omnitools are made because they're big and I don't want to mess with that in like the ones I have at work. They have a few of the edge fluorescent ones as an option. The key to the Edge Glow acrylic is that you really need clean cuts. So dremeling it and stuff like that really doesn't cut it. You really are going to need to laser engrave and laser cut it. But other than that, it's just like any other acrylic. You can heat it up and bend it. Like once it's engraved, as long as you don't mess up the edges, it'll continue to have that same internal refraction and reflection properties. So you can heat it and curl it and bend it. I've made visors out of it. By getting it first, you get it made flat from Ponoko, and then all you do is you heat it up. And I wrap this, I think, around a pot I had in the kitchen to give it that curve. But yeah, a laser cutter, not the cheapest tool for a beginner.
No, boy, is it handy. Here's one of Chris's Omnitool here that we're talking about. So that, like you said, that was all cut out flat at Ponoko, and then you just heat formed it.
Yeah,
super cool. That's what I tell folks too. Like, when I'm building like tutorial content, I avoid saying, "Well, then go to your laser cutter," because most people don't have one, even though I do. But getting stuff cut, actually, I have a sheet over there. Before I had my laser cutter, I needed a bunch of sights for all my space guns all these space guns that are lying back there, and I needed like 50 of those things cut out. So I designed the vector file in Inkscape, and I sent it out to Ponoko. I said, "Hey, can you cut out 50 of these?" And they were like, "Yeah, we totally can, man." And I think it ended up costing little sites, maybe like that big. Ended up costing about $1 for each one of them, maybe a little less. So
I think that's a big thing for people to remember. It comes up with 3D printing a lot too. You don't have to own your own to start working with the tool. I mean, yeah. I wouldn't buy a laser cutter until I had learned how to generate the files and was comfortable with it. And you can only do that if, one, you're lucky and you have one at work and they'll let you play with it. Or two, you just, you learn the skills through Ponoko or for 3D printing, Shapeways or something, and then eventually you go pick up your own.
Yeah. Brittany is chiming in. My wonderful wife, Brittany, is chiming in here to say, didn't Chris shove his face in alginate to make a face cast? Did you have any help on standby? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Chris?
That was fun. I made a mold of my face. It's in the other room. I could grab it, but I did not have help. What I did is I took a vacuum formed shell of one of my Bane masks because it vaguely fit my face. I poured a bunch of it down to alginate in it, stuck straws in my mouth, and jammed my face in there. It didn't work as well as I had hoped because the straws stick straight out, and when you jam the mask on your face, the straws don't have anywhere for air to go. So there was a little bit of panic until I moved the straws and got them in the correct locations. But after that, it's just like doing your hand. You just have to not be claustrophobic or prone to panic attacks. Just mash your face in there and stare at your table for about 5 minutes, and then wiggle your face around and pop it off. You can do your face that way. I would shudder at trying to do my entire head and shoulders that way, but
yeah, I would not recommend anyone tries that. I'm already reading the headline in my head. Cosplayer suffocates self to death making a casting of their own head.
Yeah. 90% of the stuff I do is probably not doctor certified, but it works.
We did, for those curious, we did a life casting of my shopmate Will, and there's a video. We'll put a link in the description. We did a video of it. It's really fun. It's fairly cheap using alginate and plaster bandages. What else? Oh, lots of poop jokes. So it was a good time. It's really, really handy. All right, thanks for that, Britt.
here's the key to mine was having the straw is stuck in the first cast.
So you and the casting is of you like desperately trying to keep that thing in your mouth and breathing.
Yeah. I was casting it mainly for my eyebrows area,
Yeah.
so it was a workaround, but it's not recommended.
All right, I don't recommend it either. Get a friend to help you out, folks.
That would have been preferable, yes.
This next one here is from Jacob. It says, for a piece like your Titan costume, have you considered Plasti Dip paint and then using a product called Through the Roof? It's a rubberized roof coating which dries clear that LARPers use to cover their shields when there will be a lot of physical contact. I have never heard of this wonderful product before. How about you, Chris? Have you heard of Through the Roof?
I am intrigued by this armor plated of clearness.
Yeah. That makes me wonder if it's flexible or not. I may have to get some. We'll have Britt put a link to it in the description, so we can folks can go take a look at it. If it's like if LARPers are putting it on their shields, it may be that it's not flexible. So the reason why I would use Plasti Dip on my foam armor is to keep that flex to it. But they do make clear Plasti Dip, so that's another option. And then another thing, my friends over at Weta like to sculpt rigid things out of foam, like rocks and stuff, and they spray that with the same stuff they spray in the bed of a truck, like that truck bed liner.
Yeah, vinyl liner.
Yeah, it makes a rigid coating on it, but if your armor or your prop piece needs to stay rigid, that's another option. Okay, another one. Oh, that one was from Jacob. Thank you, Jacob. Well, I'll have to go try that stuff out. This one is from Snarky Arts. To achieve a realistic gunmetal finish, I've often buffed granite powder onto a black matte paint job. Yep, or graphite powder. Yep. Have you ever heard of anyone cold casting graphite with black tinted resin? I think the look would be good, but that it would leave marks everywhere. I could try that, I guess. So with Chris knows about cold casting. He did some last time he was here. And basically you put metal powder in your mold before you throw resin in there, and then you have like a shell of metal that you can buff. You could probably do a similar thing with graphite. I'm wondering if it would just turn it into like a pencil, like when you hold it, you just get graphite all over your hand. I don't know. It's worth trying. Did you ever, actually, speaking of that, same thing, Chris, did you ever check out Harrison's, what was it, like cyberpunk gun that he made?
Yeah, that shotgun.
Yeah. So what he did for the handle on that to make it look like kind of like a polycarbonate was he hit it with a flat black spray paint on the handle, and then he buffed it with that graphite powder. The flat paint has a bit of a tooth to it, so it sort of grabs onto that graphite, and then you clear coat it, and it gives it more of a polycarbonate look.
Yeah, the other thing you can try, and I've done this before, and it really heavily depends on the brand of the can you get, but you can buy cans of spray-on dry graphite. You're meant to spray it all over stuff, and it basically covers everything in a giant layer of pencil. If you spray that onto something that's matte black, and then you have to buff the living bejesus out of it, because otherwise it is a pencil. I used that before I fell in love with foil tape to get kind of that metallic finish. So you could try that, and it's really convenient because I mean the can costs you like $10, and you can. I think I had one can for like 7 years.
Looks like what I'm seeing here at Home Depot is Blaster Graphite Dry Lube. Is that what?
Yeah. Yes, dry lube. That is the technical term for that one.
There you go.
It's an aerosol, but it's just firing out graphite powder.
Huh.
So, pretty interesting.
CRC dry graphite lube. Hey, there you go. Industrial dry graphite lube. Awesome.
That is another thing you could try if you don't want to. I guess you could spray that in your mold, or you could do it afterwards. Either way is fine.
Yeah. There you go. A couple things for you to try, Snarky Arts. All right, this next question here comes from Lee. If I were to cast spikes with Smooth On 327, what would be the best way to attach an EVA foam prop so they don't fall off? And would they cause issues at weapons checks at a convention? I don't know that the specific type of smooth cast matters. But I would embed something in the casting so that you have like something poking out the back of it, like a piece of wood or a screw that you could poke through your foam armor and attach on the other side. I did this with, I did a mace head with a bunch of spikes, and I cast all the spikes, and I did exactly that. I just took a bolt head and I suspended it in the liquid resin before it cured, and then when it did fully cure, there was a bolt sticking out of it, and I could attach it to anything I wanted to, including foam armor. As far as a weapons check at the convention, that depends on which convention you're going to. I would ask beforehand. Having plastic spikes on your costume probably won't be a problem, but some places a little more strict than others. Chris, have you ever had a problem at the weapons check at a convention before?
No. Usually I mean, I find the entire concept of weapon check to be slightly annoying, but I haven't really run into any problems. It's mostly just stand in front of a person for long enough and they'll get a sense. Like, unless you're walking in with, you know, a samurai sword or an unloaded Glock or something, they're usually just, yeah, that's fine. But you always hear those horror stories of certain conventions go way overboard and they don't want lightsabers or anything like that. So it varies so much. You'll never know.
Do your research, whatever. Actually, most conventions now I've seen will have a weapons policy on their website. If they don't, then you should definitely be able to find a way to get a hold of someone beforehand, especially if it's questionable. But I bet your plastic spikes will be just fine. Okay, thank you, Lee, for your question. This next one here comes from Count Bowl. Let's see here. My question is, how would you go about making designs for props with lots of moving parts, like the Corvo blades? Are there any design software that are recommended for designing it? Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about your design process?
I figured you'd take this one. I don't need to talk about hidden blades. I don't know nothing.
I don't have any moving parts. Everything in range of me that I can see has no moving parts.
Well,
those are all static.
The Solidworks is the program that I use. It's an engineering-based 3D modeling program. But functionally, it's, you know, you can model whatever you want in SolidWorks, or you can model engineering-grade stuff, I'm sure, in Blender or those weird artsy programs I know nothing about.
Do you do any pen and paper work when you get started, or do you go straight to SolidWorks?
I work much better in SolidWorks. I even do like project planning and stuff I never print or anything like that. I do in SolidWorks. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're looking at a lot of parts, you're basically talking about machine design. You're talking about tolerancing and offsets and things of that nature. I mean, I have a giant textbook in the back of my room called Machine Design I picked up in college that covers a lot of design for manufacturability and stuff like that. If you want to get into it, the best thing I would tell you to do is get really, really, really good at ripping apart toys. That's where I picked up a lot of the stuff I know is ripping apart, you know, a Nerf gun and just trying to understand why they did things, why certain things are in certain locations. And then that kind of leads into, if you want to make your way into making your own designs from scratch, you really need to start modifying things. So modding Nerf guns, modifying toys, action figures. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I do and a lot of other prop makers still do is kind of kit bashing, hacking stuff. Not too long ago, I made a sword. I didn't make the whole sword from scratch. I just made the pieces I needed and bought something and modified it. So that's a good way to kind of get into it. So, you know, buy a couple things, maybe, you know, drawer slides are really popular, and get an understanding of how those work. And one of the other really good tools you could buy if you really want to get into it is a pair of digital calipers. Start measuring things and understanding that, you know, there's a reason why if two parts go together, oh yeah, there they are. Like,
always within reach.
I mean, that will give you kind of a rule of thumb understanding of offsets and a little bit of an understanding of tolerances. But yeah, that's kind of a weird, you know, ball of wax to just try to jump straight into designing things from scratch.
I will tell you, I've done a little bit. I have dabbled with making things with moving parts, and it is really easy to do the thing where you say, this will totally work. And then you put the pieces together and it totally doesn't. It's just, I don't understand. It worked in my head.
I mean, I've had a couple of those. Like, I've designed a few a couple years ago, I designed a couple hidden blades that no human being has ever seen for that exact reason. You put it, it's called an error. I call it an error of SolidWorks, where you put it in SolidWorks and it all moves beautifully and it's perfect. And then you get the parts and you're like, oh, wait, well, there's nothing holding that. And oh, wow, well, shit. It is, and that's the big thing about making your own moving props is expect to make 3 different versions. I mean, if I build a hidden blade and it works on the first try, I'm surprised. I assume it's going to be 2 or 3 prototype runs. And again, I've been doing this for years professionally, so 3 is kind of my average. You may be doing 4 or 5. So
yeah, keep iterating, keep hitting it till it works. All right, thank you. Excuse me, thank you, Count Bull. Good luck designing your moving parts. This next one here comes from John. I'm looking for a way to add a swivel joint to a prop. This is the saw cleaver from Bloodborne, and I'm thinking of using a wooden handle and fiberglass EVA blade, but I'm worrying about it tearing. Any experience strengthening joints like this? You haven't done much that's like really big and heavy stuff, right, Chris? Like I imagine with the hidden blades, you don't have to worry too much about the joints tearing apart because they're fairly light, right?
Some of the smaller joints, like the blade locks and stuff, you run into that. It's kind of, it's an aspect ratio issue. If your parts get big, your joints need to get big. If you're going to try to reinforce a joint, especially a large joint, something you have to remember is torque. Because the joint may be very strong, but when it's halfway open or hanging open, you have this huge lever arm. And if it gets knocked, your joint may be strong, but you may simply twist it off. My recommendation would be either to find something off the shelf that you could physically embed into that and embed it in a way that if it breaks, you can replace it. So put like pins and screws in it. Or the other thing would be to like have some kind of, I don't know, like internal layer in your EVA blade. Then that's what that's what runs through your.
Yeah, I would say like if because the failure point of that is probably going to be the foam. Not like if you have I would picture building a joint out of say wood and not MDF, something with grain to it, like a hardwood, because that grain, like if you use poplar, let's say, that grain gives it a lot of strength especially if it's something like plywood, because you have strength in more than one axis on that because it's layered. That'll be the strong part. If you then glue that to foam, especially if it's like a polystyrene, that polystyrene is now the weakest part of the thing. So if it does that twisting, the torque, like you were saying, it'll rip the joint right out of the blade. Keep all of that in mind.
Yeah.
And probably
just like at Bill, who apparently ran across your camera behind you.
Yeah. We have a streaker. Oh my god. That may be the sort of thing like we were talking about in the previous question, where you may have to try 1 or 2 things or 3 things till you find the right solution.
And the best advice I can give you is make whatever that weakest section is, make it so that it's replaceable, so that you don't have to rip out 9 pounds of hot glue. If you can pin it in and it does break, then you can go make changes, because you don't want to redo your whole blade or your whole handle just because the little bit in the middle breaks.
Yeah, there you go. That's some good advice. Thank you, John, for your question. This next one comes from Don't Try This at Home. Let's see here. Next question is a fun one. What tool in your arsenal are you the most afraid of? Everyone's got one. His is an 8-inch, 6,000 RPM orbital buffer. He's 6 foot. He says 6 inches, but I think he means 6 foot. 185 pounds, and it tosses me around like a little rag doll. What's your scariest tool, Chris?
Other than the horrible bad ideas I have, like molding my own face without help.
You are your own scariest tool.
I am my own worst tool. Probably, I would say, like, I don't own one because I'm not comfortable with them, is a table saw. I use them at work. I'm not a huge fan of the table saw because it's just like built to cut off fingers. But the tool I have in my house that I fear it because I hate it, I guess, is my sewing machine. It's the only machine I've ever punched in anger. Sewing machines are evil.
I got this guy right here, my super cheap circular saw. And it's similar to the table saw. I don't have a table saw, but they do scare the balls off of me. This is the same thing, only the table saw is just like this. And I think I saw an episode of Rescue 911 where somehow a guy using a circular saw cut off his own hand. Like, I saw that as a child, and it has left a mark in me.
Impressive at that point, really.
Just like, how do you do that? Like, there's a handle up here, there's a handle back here. It seems like so long, like your legs might be in danger, but
maybe he was like holding the piece of wood flat, like, cutting this way, and just totally forgot.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened, but anyway, I saw that. I think ever since then, I've just been really any spinning blade is pretty scary. That's what I think. What else? And then the other one, it's really handy. But I have a router, a mini router. But I would like to get a router table at some point. That'd be really handy. But that thing, just any material that comes in contact with it, just gets turned into dust. So like 6,000 RPM is child's play compared to what this thing puts out, which is something like. Hold on. This is the compact router. And what does it do for RPM? 30,000 RPM. Yeah, there you go.
The hair faster.
So this guy, and it is, let me tell you, this thing is really handy. But it's got a little spinning, this is a bit right in there for grinding out thingies. And that just spins wicked fast. That's what this tool does. I'll tell you, when you need that for a job, man, that's handy. All right, thank you for the wonderful question there. Don't try this at home. Here's one from Mike. He says, is there really any need for sealing your foam? Plasti Dip is hard to find and expensive in Canada. And then the last thing he made, he just spray painted it, and it didn't seem to have any issues. I go over this in the Foamsmith trilogy that we have for sale at punishprops.com. But my Mass Effect armor, I never sealed that, and it's getting beat up, and the finish is coming off, but it looks cool because there's just gray foam showing beneath, and that looks fine. So it really depends on if you have a finish that you want to protect, that you want to make sure you keep the way it is when you finish it. So, for example, my why can't I think of it? My Draugr armor, I sealed that because I was going for a very specific texture, and I put an epoxy resin on there that I could sand down to the finish that I liked. So that's why I used a sealant for that. But you don't always have to. It really depends on what you're doing, how much wear it's going to get, and all of that. You said you used PVA glue for your foam armor, Chris?
Yeah, it also depends a little bit on, like, and I know people run into this depending on what floor mats you get. I picked up my EVA from McMaster, so it's texturedless. It depends on your EVA. Like, certain foams they tear up a lot easier than some of the higher density ones. So if you have a really high quality foam and you want a gray finish,
yep. Or you can buy like floor mats in all sorts of colors. If you go to, let me see here, WeSellMats.com. You can get them in, like, if your armor is blue, you can get blue. Yeah, check this out. Boop! Look at all the pretty colors. So yeah, if you want to just build your whatever your base color is, if you can buy floor mats that are that color, then you are most of the way there. There you go. Thank you. That was Mike. Thank you for your question. Another one here from Sam. When making a costume for yourself, do you prefer to make it as accurate as possible to the source material, or do you prefer to put your own spin on it? I know what Chris is going to say. Go for it.
I'm going to say that using the term accuracy to describe a costume is slightly erroneous. Hitting a predefined target within a meaningful tolerance, neither of which can be defined in artistic endeavors, much less transformative ones. But all that aside, I prefer to try to put in as much of the character and the costume and the universe that is really indicative of that character, the stuff that you love. But if there's something that just it gets in the way of comfortability, it gets in the way of a reasonable budget or a reasonable timetable, or if it gets in the way of some really cool stuff that you just thought of, like, it's your costume. Like, every costume I have made is my costume, and my Garrus is different than someone else's Garrus. No matter what I do, that's going to be true. So I might as well have a couple areas that are intentional. And so I just think that, like, really well done mashup costumes, or, you know, like this really great steampunk stuff, you know, original space guns from people who I might be talking to, it makes things a little bit more interesting. But, like, obviously I understand the concept of, like, loving a character and wanting to embody it. I think it's a mixture between those two things, doing the things the way you can do them and the way you're interested in, and then also being faithful to the kind of zeitgeist of the original character. I think blending those is where people should aim. Aiming for either one purely fun, like do whatever you want, you know, Hulk hands and a tutu, or purely, you know, a slave to the details to the most asinine level. Either one of those is bad.
I'll tell you what, the costumes that always impress me are the ones that are some sort of really cool creative mashup. And I always kick myself. I'm like, why couldn't I think of something that clever? All I did was make something that looked like it was right out of the video game. But with my Destiny armor, I fudged a whole bunch of stuff. I liked the front of one torso and the back of another, so I attached those. And then when I was painting it, I was like, caution to the wind, and I painted it however I wanted. And people were asking me, oh, what shader is that? I'm like, that's the punished prop shader that I just made up. But it was fun. Like, that's how I thought it looked good, so that's how I did it. You can't stop me. I do what I want.
I think in the end, that should be the goal. Make something that you're happy with and that looks cool. And if what looks cool is what's in the game, then hey, lucky for you, it's already been tested out. But if you have another idea, go for it. I mean, I'm often confused at times that people seem to jump through so many hoops to try to replicate something that seems to me like they're not really interested in it.
Yeah, especially when it comes to like the functionality of something you have to wear. So like like again on my Titan costume, the part on the side of the torso, I made up all of it. I just made it up so that I could take it off. That was a big concern of mine, was taking it off and putting it on. So as like the front chest piece, you're like, oh, that's totally a Titan chest piece, and the back, you're like, oh, that looks clever. That looks like it's from the game, and that's it. Like, that's all you have to notice. Oh, that looks like a Titan.
Yeah.
I had like a 5-year-old kid run up to me at Emerald City Comic Con, like, you're a Titan from Destiny. I was like, wow, yeah, you got it, kid. Like, why are your parents letting you do Destiny?
As long as you don't change so much that someone would end your costume with like an interrogative, like, you're a Titan, right? Like, as long as you're not that far away from it. Like, I've seen people who do Mass Effect costumes and people who've done tons of stuff that are kind of quasi mashups. They're pulling from multiple pieces of concept art or different characters, and you know intrinsically, like, oh, that's a really great, slightly different version of that character. So as long as you're not just, you know, like if someone made like a neon pink version of Garrus armor, I'd be like, okay, are you Garrus? Like, you know, like if you're that far off, maybe, but otherwise, yeah, have fun with it and make it functional. And, you know, I'm a big fan of, if you can fit LEDs in something, put LEDs in something.
Of course.
No matter what game designers did. Yeah, pointless illumination is required in all of my costumes.
Here we go. This one is from Willard. Not a question, but Willard says that his Foam Smith book just showed up in the mail. Hooray! The next actual question is from Brian. Do you have any questions for preventing bleed when using a stencil to add detail to a prop? Yeah, I do, actually. I use, actually, getting good masking tape helps. This stuff right here, this is like the Delicate Surfaces frog tape. It's pretty good. I know that, who is it? Tamiya makes really, really good masking tape. It's a lot pricier, but it is super, super good for doing, like, what's this stuff too? This is pretty good as well. Like, the answer really is buy a bunch of different masking tapes and try them all and see which one works best for you. I'm still working on that. This is the Safe Release 3M Delicate Surfaces stuff. That's pretty good too. Yeah, try a lot of different good masking tapes. Do you have a favorite masking tape, Chris?
Yeah, whatever I bought last week and I still have is the masking tape I use. My only recommendation is I bought, they call them like Apple opening tools, even though that's not what they are, but little plastic sticks. If you use those and kind of scrub down over the edges of your stencil, that will often help keep the bleed down.
It's like a plastic spatula, like a little plastic spatula.
Yeah, they call them Apple opening tools, but they're actually soldering tools. So you can go to Amazon and search for that, and you can get like a bucket of them for like $10.
What's that? I think it's called a spudger. Yes! It's good, by the way, everybody. I got pictures. Who wants to see my spudger? Yeah, a plastic spudger is what you're looking for. And it's just a little plastic spatula thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that one in the corner is exactly, I think, the type I have.
Yeah.
And it works really well for foil tape as well.
Yes, it does. The other thing you can do that works is once you have your stencil down, if you're worried about if your paint bleeding under it, spray it with clear paint first, like a clear coat, and let that dry, and then do your paint over that. The clear paint will clog any gaps that you have, and it's clear, so you won't see it. And then go over it with your paint, and that'll just cover, hopefully, just the area that you have masked off. So there's a couple things. Also, Brian wanted to know about the vinyl cutter I have. It is the K&K Max 24-inch wide vinyl cutter, and it is mighty handy.
Yeah, I might even put that on the list of good introduction tools. I have a silhouette portrait. I got it for like $100 on Amazon. It's I think it's 12 by 8 or something. It's the smaller format ones. But I've used it thousands of times. Like, it's really great for patterning, for stencils, for...
Oh, so it's got just a 12-inch by 8-inch bed on it?
So it's one of these, like, sticky sheet-em-a-bobs that you jam everything on, and you can just, it rolls through. So as long as it fits on here, I can cut it.
Okay.
That for, I've labeled boxes with it. It's a really good tool to have. And again, it's really cheap for what you're getting.
Yeah, that really is cheap. That's a lot less than I spent on mine. The major benefit of the one I got is it's 2 feet wide, and it'll roll through however much you want to feed it. So if you want to make a 2 foot wide by 8 foot long, I don't know, phallus, and then put it on your shopmate's car, you have that option. So. Not listening, is he? No? All right, good. That'll happen next year for April Fools, I think. Giant dong on Will's car. Right, another question. This one's from Justin. He got his Foam Smith book today, too. Hooray! He also wants to know, what do you use to thin normal acrylic paints when you want to use them in an airbrush? Have you done much airbrushing, Chris?
I did some years ago, but I just used pre-made paints.
Mm-hmm. I'm really bad at mixing paint, so whenever I can get something that's pre-mixed or pre-made, I'll go with that. You can technically thin acrylic with water, but I've also seen people mix up their own acrylic thinner, and I've purchased acrylic thinner before. I think, I can't even remember where it was. It may have been at the hobby store. I think they had a bottle of what they called acrylic thinner, and I just bought that, and it seemed to work just fine. I don't know very much about thinning acrylic or airbrushing, though. Generally, I will just get something pre-made. Thank you, Justin, for your question. We've got about 5 minutes left here. We'll grab a couple more questions here, and then we'll head on off into the sunset. This one is from Lamb. So I want to make more armor cosplay. Should I spend the money on Worbla or more tools to work with EVA? I've made a few foam things before, but I have never used Worbla. Oh, I mean, I might be a little bit biased, but I say you should probably go with foam. Invest a couple dollars in some reading material, perhaps, and then go bonkers with it. Well, how about you, Chris? If you were thinking about making some new armor, where would you go?
I'm a huge fan of hard armor, personally.
Yeah.
Sorry, your witness, but I haven't played with Worbla. I have some friends who have used it, but I got really comfortable using PETG, which is a shite side cheaper than Worbla and is a thermoplastic that reasonably easy to work with. It kind of just depends on your preference. I mean, if I had no strong leaning towards hard armors and I had to choose between Worbla and foam, I choose foam. It's easier to work with. It's cheaper, so if you screw up, you just chuck the piece and do another one. That would be my recommendation if you have no strong preference.
I would also say, too, that if you haven't worked with Worbla and you have the opportunity to, maybe get a sample of it, go for it and play with it, see how you like it. Some people just like that better. You literally only need scissors and a heat gun because it's self-adhesive. So there are some aspects of the Worbla that make it very, very attractive for whatever your situation is. If you are thinking about getting into EVA and you want to buy more tools for it, consider things like, if you don't have a Dremel, obviously get a Dremel. But I'll tell you what, the bandsaw I have, it's the cheapest bandsaw money could buy. I think it was like 130 bucks, made by Skill. It's not a good bandsaw. I want to replace it, but it is so handy at cutting foam, cutting out shapes, cutting bevels, especially because you can tilt the bed on it and cut bevels on it. You can it's got a fence, so you can cut multiple pieces at the same thickness. Yeah, so if there's something if you really want to up your foam game, go for that bandsaw. And if you have a place where you can use a bandsaw, probably not good in an apartment.
No.
All right, good luck, Lamb. Jump on the foam train. It's awesome here. Let's see here. One more here from Count Bold. This one is he's trying to make the retractable bow from the game Thief that came out in 2014. Any recommendations or ideas to find a site that has retractable rods and springs so I don't have to make them myself? Oh, that's...
McMaster Car is... I use it professionally and as a prop maker. It's a really good place to get kind of engineering grade stuff. Or, I mean, especially if you don't know what you're looking for, you could go to like a hardware store and just roam around and get an idea. But yeah, McMaster is a great place to get things that are often used in the construction of engineering products, spring, and all of that kind of off-the-shelf stuff. So
here's their website here, McMaster Car. And I'm going to be honest with you, for a long time I thought it was an automotive store because of the name. I was just mentioning, I'm going to look up bandsaw blades. I was just mentioning that bandsaw. They have a ridiculous selection of different types of bandsaw blades. And the one I just got is the bandsaw blade for soft materials. The scalloped edge blade is really, really fantastic for cutting foam. And this is the sort of thing that I can't find anywhere. I can't even find it on Amazon. It's certainly not locally, but McMaster Car has one, so I ordered it.
Yeah, McMaster Car is great. Like, I order EVA foam off of it in rolls, untextured. I order my PETG sheets. I get 6 foot by 2 foot sheets or something. I mean, you can get, like, if you were to go into production and you needed a weird, I need 500 of this particular spring, that's the place you're probably going to find it.
I didn't know that they sold EVA foam. Check this out: 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and 1 inch. Let's see here.
It is also where I get all of my foil tape. I have they sell it in 6-inch wide strips, which is why I can do big things like the Destiny blade without having to piece together smaller chunks.
This is cool. They sell it in 12-inch by 12-inch pieces, or 29-inch by 47-inch pieces, which are fairly big, which is really nice. And let's see, a 1/2 inch sheet is 51 bucks. All right, so it's not cheap, but it is handy.
That's
cool.
Like I bought my EVA from them specifically because I'm not a foam smith, to reduce the number of joints I had to make for making big armor pieces. So you pay for that giant chunk and the shipping of that giant chunk, but it's really nice.
Cool. Well, that is a good place to end it, folks. Go to McMaster Car. Just start looking around. Just start seeing what they have. That's what I'm going to do after dinner today. I'm just going to go there and just start throwing things in a shopping cart. It's going to be a good time. And that's it. That's all we have for tonight. Thank you, everyone, very much for sending us your wonderful questions. Your content helps make the show. You guys are awesome. If you really would like to support the show, we have a Patreon page. If you go over to patreon.com/punishprops, you can help be one of the fine human beings who helps make this show possible by throwing a little money our way. Other than that, I will be at Big Wow Comic Fest in San Jose this weekend. I will be in the San Francisco area for the day or two after that because I'm going to go hang out with my buddy Chris. Yeah. And how about you, Chris? You have anything coming up you want to throw out there?
Nothing big. I'm gearing up. I'm trying to get everything cool for Dragon Con. That'll be the big one this year.
Awesome. Well, I'll be there too. That's going to be really, really fun. Thank you very much for being on the show, man. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
And so long, everyone. We'll see you all again next week when we do this whole Prop Live thing again. Toodaloo!